The Wild West wasn't just about whiskey and gunfights. Frontier saloons served some surprising hearty meals, from sourdough pancakes to deep-fried bull testicles. These were real dishes that kept cowboys fueled. Let's check out 20 Wild West recipes you might never have imagined. Son of a gun stew. A true cowboy dish, this stew used every leftover cut, tripe, liver, heart, even brain, simmered with potatoes and onions. Cheap, filling, and tough to stomach for some, it was survival food that kept saloons fed when prime cuts were scarce. Sourdough flapjacks. Cowboys lived on these heavy sourdough pancakes, cooked in bacon grease and nicknamed sinkers. Tangy from long-fermented starter, they were served with molasses or drippings, simple, filling, and built to last. Fried salt pork and beans, a true cowboy staple. Beans with fried salt pork were simple but hearty. The brined pork lasted for months, fried crisp and poured over pinto or navy beans. Sometimes sweetened with molasses or onions, but often just beans and pork fat, it was filling fuel for long rides. Saloons kept pots simmering day and night. No cowboy wanted whiskey on an empty stomach. Chuck wagon coffee. Cowboys swore by this tar-black brew, boiled in tin pots and settled with eggshells or even rawhide. Saloons kept a pot simmering all day, serving cups strong enough to float a horseshoe, sometimes with a splash of whiskey for kick. Prairie oysters, Rocky Mountain oysters. Not seafood, but deep-fried bull testicles, these were a frontier rite of passage. Cleaned, sliced, coated in seasoned flour, and fried until crisp. They were served in saloons across Colorado, Wyoming, and Texas, often with hot sauce or beer. Eating them proved toughness, refusing invited ridicule. Rabbit stew. When beef was scarce, cowboys turned to rabbit. Lean meat browned in pork fat, simmered with potatoes, onions, carrots, and sometimes chilies or herbs made a simple, hearty stew. Filling and comforting, it reminded weary riders of home. Squirrel fricassee. On the frontier, squirrel wasn't odd. It was everyday food. Cheap, abundant, and surprisingly tasty, it showed up in saloons across wooded regions, from Missouri to Arkansas, especially when beef was too costly. The fricassee method, borrowed from European settlers, meant the squirrel was pan-fried, then simmered in a creamy gravy made from drippings, flour, and milk. Served over biscuits or cornbread, it was rich, peppery, and filling. This wasn't a dish on the front signboard. It was a local's meal, passed quietly through barkeeps and back doors, proof that saloons doubled as community kitchens for those who lived off the land. Corn Dodger biscuits. When yeast was scarce, cowboys turned to cornmeal. Corn Dodgers were dense biscuits made from cornmeal, boiling water, salt, and sometimes bacon drippings, shaped by hand and cooked in skillets, on hot rocks or fried in grease. Saloons dressed them up with molasses or served them beside beans and stew, but on the trail they were tough, gritty, and built to last, often carried in saddlebags or wrapped in cloth for the next morning's fire. In saloons, they were simple sides. For cowboys, they were proof that hunger could be beaten with cornmeal, smoke, and stubbornness. Pickled eggs. Those cloudy jars behind the saloon bar weren't decoration. They were snacks. Hard-boiled eggs soaked in vinegar brine with salt, spices, garlic, and sometimes beet juice or chili peppers turned into tangy, spicy bites that lasted for weeks. Cheap, filling, and no fork required, cowboys could grab one for a few cents, sprinkle on salt or hot sauce, and wash it down with whiskey or beer. In the 1870s, pickled eggs were the frontier's version of fast food. Quick, portable, and always ready on the counter. Hardtack and gravy, nicknamed toothbreakers. Hardtack was a rock-hard biscuit of flour, water, and salt meant to last for years. On its own, it was barely edible, but saloons knew how to dress it up. They softened the chunks in water or broth, then smothered them with gravy made from pork drippings, flour, and pepper, sometimes with onions or bacon tossed in. For trail-weary cowboys, it was a small comfort. The same survival ration, but warm, filling, and finally chewable. Hardtack and gravy summed up frontier cooking. Make do, waste nothing, and turn grease into gold. Buffalo roast. Before cattle ruled the plains, buffalo was the meat of choice. With herds roaming in the millions, saloons near railways and hunting camps served roasted bison as a premium dish. Lean and dark like venison, the meat was slow roasted over open flames or in cast iron ovens, basted with fat, salt, and herbs when available. The prized cut was the hump roast, prized for its tenderness. Served thin with gravy or potatoes, buffalo often cost more than beef in boomtowns, making it a celebratory meal for cowboys with winnings to spend. Its popularity, however, helped push the buffalo toward near extinction. But for a time, it was the crown jewel of the frontier table. Biscuits and molasses. For cowboys low on money or energy, this was comfort food. Quick biscuits of flour, lard, and sour milk baked in skillets were topped with thick, sweet molasses. Cheap, filling, and shelf-stable. Saloons served them as a snack, a sugar boost, or even dessert when pie wasn't an option. For many cowboys, especially from the South, it was more than food. It was a taste of home. Fried calf brains. On the frontier, nothing went to waste. When cattle were butchered, the brains were cleaned, sliced, battered, and fried until golden. Crisp outside and creamy inside, they were often served with onions, mustard, or hot sauce, and in some towns even paired with eggs for a brain breakfast. Influenced by German, French, and Mexican cooking, saloons turned offal into delicacy. For cowboys, if it was fried, it was fair game. Game jerky, venison, elk, antelope. Jerky wasn't only trail food, saloons served it too. Hunters supplied dried strips of venison, elk, or antelope, cured with salt, smoke, and sun, sometimes spiced with pepper, sage, or juniper. Tough, chewy, and long-lasting, it paired perfectly with whiskey or beer. Some saloons even offered jerky plates with pickles or cheese, making it the original bar snack. More than food, jerky was self-reliance you could chew. Miner's pot pie. In boomtown saloons, pot pie was cheap, filling comfort food. Made with rough-cut beef, rabbit, or squirrel stewed with onions and root vegetables, it was baked in pans lined with pastry or topped with biscuit dough. Served by the slice or in tin pans with pickles or beans, it gave miners and cowboys a rare taste of home. A hot, gravy-filled pot pie and a pint of beer made the rough frontier feel a little softer. Cornmeal mush with tallow drizzle, cheap, filling, and everywhere. Cornmeal mush was the frontier's version of polenta. Cornmeal was simmered into a thick porridge, cooled into loaves, then sliced and fried golden. Saloons topped it with molasses for sweet or drizzled beef tallow, with salt and pepper for savory. Simple, hearty, and rugged, it was fuel for cowboys and railroad hands who needed warmth more than luxury. Wild turkey and dumplings. In wooded regions, saloons turned to wild turkey when beef was scarce. The tough birds were simmered until tender, then folded into broth with onions, herbs, and pepper. Flour dumplings were dropped in at the end, swelling into soft, hearty bites. Rustic but comforting, it reminded cowboys of Sunday dinners back home, a dish good enough to pull gamblers away from the table. Dried apple pie. Fresh fruit was rare out west, but dried apples filled the gap. Soaked, spiced with cinnamon and sugar, and baked in thick lard crusts, they became sturdy saloon pies. Heavy, smoky, and sweet, each slice tasted like a memory of orchards long gone, a treat worth more than whiskey to some cowboys. Fried corn cakes, Johnny cakes. Born from native tradition and carried into saloons, Johnny cakes were the West's flatbread, cornmeal batter fried crisp on a griddle. Served plain, with molasses, or under beans and stew, they were tough, filling, and fast to make. Cowboys called them trail flapjacks, but in every saloon, they were simply hot and good. Cow tongue and brown gravy. In frontier saloons, cow tongue wasn't strange. It was a delicacy. Simmered for hours, peeled, sliced, and smothered in rich brown gravy, it was silky, hearty, and deeply satisfying. Served with potatoes or cornbread, this wasn't trail food. It was comfort food for those who could pay a little extra. Yep, every one of these 20 dishes really showed up in Wild West saloons. They weren't just whiskey halls. They were the first diners of the frontier. Some meals were strange, some simple, and some you might actually crave today. If this taste of the Old West made you hungry for more, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments. Which dish would you try and which one would you never touch? Saddle up, timekeepers. The next story's waiting.